Good evening and welcome to Mining the Riches of the Parsha. Tonight is Thursday night, July 25th, 2024, and I am thrilled to be with you tonight. I'm grateful to every one of you for setting aside the time so that we could study together. Ernest Becker was a remarkable scientist. He did research in social science. He wrote many works, including a classic titled The Denial of Death. If you have not read it, I urge you to read it. It is a momentous book. But the foreword begins with this inscription. He wrote this work to the memory of my beloved parents, who unwittingly gave me, among many other things, the most paradoxical gift of all, a confusion about heroism. For many years, I have been reluctant to talk about Pinchas, the character, the namesake of this week's Torah portion, the Parsha Pinchas. And I've been reluctant because what Pinchas did in last week's Torah portion and its reference at the beginning of this Torah portion, what he did was dangerous. And because what Pinchas has become, Pinchas has been co-opted as a symbol of or a representative of extremism, zealotry, and violence. And I have great difficulty with extremism and zealotry because of the overwhelming probability of their abuse. And Pinchas as a role model frightens me. It is frightening me now. But the narrative actually has a very different message. And it is crucial to learn from this. So at the end of last week's Torah portion, the Parsha Balak, we saw the narrative that there was this public sinning of immorality and idolatry of the Jewish people together with women from Moab. And there was one specific incident involving Zimri, who was a prince of Israel, and Cosby, who was a princess of Moab, engaging in immorality. And as a result of that, there is a plague that comes upon the Jewish people from God, and 24,000 Jews die in this plague, and the plague is ongoing, and everyone is frozen. Moshe, Aharon, the Zekanim, the Nesiim, everyone is frozen. And Pinchas takes action. Pinchas kills these two people, Zimri and Cosby. So please do not glorify the killing, because there are too many qualifications, too many requirements to make it actionable, and even with all of that, it is still deeply troublesome. But the effect is Vateyatzar hamagefa. The plague stopped. Pinchas, ironically, saves thousands of lives by halting this plague. So what is it that the Torah does want us to learn from this narrative? Allow me to share with you the work of Dr. Phillip Zimbardo, especially his book, The Lucifer Effect. Dr. Zimbardo was a psychologist. He taught for many years at Stanford University in California. He studied the U.S. soldiers who committed atrocities against prisoners in the Abu Ghraib prison in Baghdad. You may remember a number of years ago, it came out that a number of American soldiers had been torturing prisoners in this prison in Iraq, in Baghdad. And you may remember that the initial United States government response was, well, when the atrocities first came to light, well, it was a few bad apples. A few misguided people amongst the overwhelming majority of upright and moral soldiers. Dr. Zimbardo studied this incident and the people who were involved, and over a lifetime of studying this kind of behavior, writes that the line between good and evil is not solid. It's permeable. In a given situation, it is almost impossible to predict who will choose which path. It is not true that those soldiers who acted in such a heinous manner, that they had anything in their backgrounds like drugs or crime that would seem to predispose them to committing these atrocities. It's not true. Alexander Solzhenitsyn wrote, "The line between good and evil cuts through the heart of every human being." Fredrik Backman, I have mentioned him to you before. He wrote a novel called Us Against You. It's one of a trilogy. They're fantastic. You have to read Fredrik Backman. It's just a wonderful, 3 wonderful novels. This is from Us Against You, and he writes, "The complicated thing about all people, good and bad alike, is that most of us can be both at the same time. Just about any person can become a villain or a hero. But we make a serious mistake in who we look up to as heroes." So, who is a hero? Who do you think of as a hero? Well, Moshe is a hero. Martin Luther King is a hero. Mother Teresa is a hero. Superman is a hero. Okay, yes, certainly those are heroes. But if that is our conception of what heroism is, then we're making poor choices, because they are unrealistic models for most of us. Those individuals have great ability. They devote their lives and sacrifice for a cause. What does that have to do with me? If they're heroes, there's no way that I could be a hero, so why even try? But in response to that, we need to teach ourselves and we need to teach our children that every one of us is a potential hero. I am, you are a hero in waiting. Any ordinary person can become a hero, because in any given dramatic situation, there are 3 paths in front of you. You can be a perpetrator of evil. You can be passive, inactive, or you can become a hero. Now, there's no way to predict who will choose what. So you have to train yourself and train your children, teach your children to be ready when that dramatic moment comes. And here is Dr. Zimbardo's main finding of all of his research. You can train yourself. And the most effective way to do that is to label yourself the way you look at yourself. I am a hero in waiting. You are a hero in waiting. And when I call myself that, when I see myself as that, that is the best preparation for when that moment will come. In other words, you can teach yourself to be contrary. In other words, willing to go against a passive group of bystanders in a given situation when it's necessary. Let me share with you a remarkable story about Wesley Autry. He's a construction worker in New York. On January 2nd, 2007, Wesley Autry was on a subway platform in New York City. Wesley Autry was with his 2 children, and there were about 75 other people on the platform waiting for the next subway. And all of a sudden, a fellow falls off the platform onto the tracks. And a subway car is coming. And everyone freezes because this is certain death for the man on the track. Wesley Autry hands his 2 children to a stranger beside him, jumps on the tracks, lies down on top of the stranger in the middle of the track, and the train rolls over them, and they both emerge without a scratch. Incredible. But here's the really incredible part. He later said, I did what anyone could do and what everyone ought to do. That's the lesson of Pinchas. Pinchas was not anyone special. He was one in a crowd. But at a dramatic moment when people were dying, there were 3 choices open to him. He wasn't greater than Moshe or Aharon, but Moshe and Aharon were frozen. They could not bring themselves to act in that moment. And that's the moment that Pinchas became a hero. One day, you will suddenly be in a situation with 3 paths in front of you. You can perpetrate evil, you can remain passive, inactive, or you can become a hero. It may only happen once. But if you don't choose boldly, if you don't deviate from the frozen inaction of the group, you will live the rest of your life wondering if you could have been a hero. The well-known novelist Jodie Picoult wrote, "Who we are isn't so much about what we do, but rather what we're capable of when we least expect it." Pinchas teaches us what we are capable of when we least expect it is to decide to be a hero. And the time to decide that is right now. I've spoken with you many times about Rav Nota Greenblatt, of blessed memory. He passed away about 2 years ago. He was a brilliant authority in Jewish law, in every single area of Jewish law. He spent most of his life living in Memphis, Tennessee, where I was born and raised. I knew Rabbi Greenblatt. I was close to him from the time that I was born until the day that he passed away, my entire life. Much of his work was traveling from city to city, town to town, serving as a resource for any imaginable Jewish need. He was a mohel, he was a shochet, he built eruvs, he oversaw the construction of mikvahs, he did a get in all kinds of places, he did conversions, he did kashrus supervisions, he was a sofer, a scribe. Every area of Jewish law he was proficient, and he practiced it. And the nature of his expertise and the generosity of his availability often led him to help young, inexperienced rabbis in small Jewish communities. And he did this for me in the first years of my rabbinate when I was in New Orleans, as he did for countless others. One Saturday night, he got a telephone call from a young rabbi in a small town in Texas. And the rabbi was frantic. It was just after the end of Shabbos. This week's Torah portion, the Torah portion that morning was Pinchas. Our Torah portion, the Shabbos, so it was Saturday night after the Parsha Pinchas, and this young rabbi is on the phone to Rav Nota. Rebbe, what do I do? During the Torah reading this morning, we found a mistake in the Torah scroll. Every letter has to be properly formed. We found a mistake, and the Torah was invalid. So we took out another Torah. That's what you have to do. If you're in the middle of reading the Torah and you find that it's invalid, it's puzzle, you have to take out another Torah. So, Rebbe, we took out another Torah, and it was also puzzle. And we took out another Torah and another Torah. Every single Torah scroll that we have is invalid. It's puzzle. Rebbe, what do we do? So Rav Nota said to him, just the characteristic brilliance of this man. Rav Nota said to him, by any chance, was the problem in every one of your Torah scrolls, the problem that you saw, was it the letter Vav in the word Shalom, which means peace? It's near the beginning of the Torah portion. This week's Parsha begins as follows. Remember, I told you, the end of last week's Parsha is the incident where Pinchas stops the plague, and our Parsha starts, Vayedaber Hashem Moshe Lemar. Hashem says to Moshe, Pinchas, Ben Elazar, etc., Hey Shivas Chamasimi al Bnei Yisrael, Bekano es Kinosi. Pinchas alleviated the plague. L'chein emor, therefore say, Hirni no sein lo es brisi shalom. Behold, God says, I will bestow upon him my covenant of shalom, my covenant of peace. Shalom is spelled in Hebrew, Shin, Lamed, Vav, Mem. Shalom, peace. Pinchas earns the covenant of peace. So Rav Nota says to this young frantic rabbi, was that the mistake? And the rabbi said, yeah, how did you know? How did you know? And Rav Nota said to him, it's okay, you have no problem. The Vav in the word Shalom at the beginning of our Parsha is called a Vav Katia, a split Vav. It's a slight space. The Vav is a vertical line, and there's a crack in it, a space in the height of the line. Ordinarily, for any other word, that would be a psul. That would invalidate the entire Torah scroll until you fix it. But this Vav in this word, it's supposed to be like that. It's okay. Your Torahs are all okay. Why does this specific letter in this specific word, why is it supposed to be written in an incomplete form with a space in the middle of it, a crack, something missing in the middle of it? So I want to share with you an approach. Now, the approach is partially based on the writing of Rabbi Avram Asachachav in his famous work Shem MiShmuel, partially, and it's just a little bit complicated, And it will start off somewhat esoteric, but I know you're going to hold with me. All right, let's start here. In Hebrew, you may know, you can write a number of words. There are a number of words in Hebrew that you can write them with two different spellings without changing the meaning or the pronunciation. For example, there are some words that could be written with or without the letter Vav. When the word is written with the letter Vav, it's called mole, which means full. So this example of this word is in its full appearance. When the same word appears without the Vav, it's called chaser, missing. It's missing a Vav. Again, both words have the same meaning and the same pronunciation. It's just the difference in the spelling. For example, there's a name in the Torah many times. Yaakov, Jacob, our patriarch Jacob, Yaakov. Yaakov in Hebrew is spelled Yud, Ayin, Kuf, Vet. The word Yaakov could be Malay with a Vav after the Kuf, or Chaser without a Vav after the Kuf, but it could be either one, but it's always Chaser. It's always spelled without a Vav. There's another name, familiar name, Eliyahu, Elijah the prophet. Eliyahu Hanavi. Eliyahu could be spelled with a Vav at the end, that would be Malay, or it could be spelled without the Vav at the end, that would be Chaser. It is always spelled Malay. Yaakov is without a Vav, Eliyahu is with a Vav, except for 5 places in the Torah. There are 5 places in the Torah where Yaakov is spelled with a Vav, and Eliyahu is spelled without a Vav. Again, no difference in the meaning, no difference in the pronunciation, it's only a difference in the spelling. Why the discrepancy? So our sages give us a very mysterious answer. I know you're holding with me because there's still a few more steps here. Our sages give us a very mysterious answer. They say as follows. Yaakov natal os mishmo shel Eliyahu aravon. Yaakov, our patriarch Jacob, took a letter away from Eliyahu Hanavi, the prophet Elijah, as a security, to be held in escrow. Yaakov took the letter away from Eliyahu's name to hold it in escrow. Sheyavo vivaser geula lebanav, in order to wait for Eliyahu to come to announce the upcoming imminent redemption of the Jewish people with the coming of Mashiach. When Eliyahu Hanavi finishes that mission, then Eliyahu gets his Vav back. His name will be full with a Vav, even those 5 times. Okay. It's a very strange answer, I understand. But listen to what the Maharal explains. Eliyahu, Elijah, was a man. He was a prophet in the Sefer Malachim, the Book of Kings. But our sages tell us that Eliyahu is also a harbinger. Our sages teach us that Eliyahu will come to announce the imminent arrival of Mashiach, the Messianic era. At the Pesach Seder, we have a kos shel Eliyahu, a cup for Elijah. We open the door to see if Eliyahu Hanavi has come to announce the imminent arrival of the complete redemption. Until that happens, though, Eliyahu's life is incomplete because Eliyahu has not yet completed this mission that he is destined to fulfill. And for that reason, this unfinished nature of Eliyahu's mission in life is reflected in his shortened name. His name spelled missing the Vav in 5 places, which Yaakov, our patriarch Jacob, is holding on to in order to ensure that Eliyahu will come and do this task. And when Eliyahu does come and fulfill this task to announce the arrival of Mashiach, he will get his vavs back. Okay, I understand. It's very esoteric, but just a couple more steps, and then we'll be there. Our rabbis tell us that Pinchas, in our Torah portion, is Eliyahu. Now, I don't know what that means. Does that mean that he was a human being who lived a miraculously long lifespan because Eliyahu lived centuries after Pinchas? Does it mean it's the same person, change of name, but he just lived 700, 800, 900 years? Does it mean that there's a connection between their personalities? Does it mean that there is some kind of spiritual connection between their spiritual identities? I don't know exactly what it means. But that's what our sages say. Eliyahu and Pinchas are equated. Pinchas is Eliyahu. All right. Now, but if the Vav is affected in Eliyahu's name, and Pinchas is Eliyahu, then Pinchas's name must also be somehow affected. And that is why, when the Torah says at the beginning of our Torah portion, where God says, Hineni nosein lo, as brisi shalom, behold, I will bestow upon him, Pinchas, is referring to Pinchas, as brisi shalom, my covenant of peace, the word shalom, peace, the Vav is missing a little piece. It's missing a small portion. There is shalom, but it's not complete. We're still living in a fractured world. We're still lacking harmony. We're still alienated from each other and from God. That's why the Vav is missing a small piece. We find ourselves today near the beginning of the period that we refer to as the 3 weeks. 3 weeks of intensifying acts of mourning and introspection leading up to Tisha B'Av, the 9th of Av, the day we commemorate the saddest day on the Jewish calendar, the destruction of the first Beit HaMikdash, the second temple, so many other catastrophes that have befallen the Jewish people. This year we have so much more to mourn over. But the goal of the practices of these 3 weeks, and it is crucial that there is a specific, concrete goal in our observance of these 3 weeks. The goal is to recognize that the greatest problems we, the Jewish people, face, and this has never been as true as it is today. The greatest problems we face are the internal divisions between Jews in Israel, in Montreal, and around the world. I've shared with you before the documented straight line from the internal dissension of a year ago in Israel to the brutal attack on October 7th and since. And I have shared with you from so many different sources the need we have to not go back to October 6th in order to be worthy of the sacrifices that so many have made since then and continuing today. This past Tuesday was the 17th of Tammuz, the fast day that began this 3-week period. And I shared on that day, and many, many others around the world shared on that day, the eerie, tragic connection we have this year to this fast day, We've been commemorating this fast day for almost 2,000 years, but this year it rings differently than ever before because the 17th of Tammuz is the anniversary of the day that the Romans pierced the walls, the fortified walls of Jerusalem, and flooded the city with enemy soldiers who 3 weeks later destroyed Jerusalem. A particularly poignant expression of this was written in Hebrew by Tehila Siani. Af echad lo tzarich lasbir hashana. No one has to explain this year lamatzamim kishenifretzet choma, why we are fasting when the security walls were breached. But I want to share with you something remarkable, and I ask you to please open your hearts to hear this deeply. This was posted on Tuesday, the 17th of Tammuz. I am David Sherez, a secular Jew from birth. Sherez is also a commander serving in the IDF in Gaza. But this is how he introduces himself in this post. I am David Sherez, a secular Jew from birth, and I am fasting today. The 17th of Tammuz, fast day. Religious Jews fasted. Secular Jews, not so much. Listen to what he says. On the 17th of Tammuz, the Romans broke through the walls of Jerusalem and began 3 weeks of destruction and murder until the 9th of Av, Tisha B'Av, when they burned down the temple. What people know less about is that Jewish tradition lists another difficult event that took place on this date. Moshe, our teacher, descended from Mount Sinai with the luchos, the 2 tablets with the Aseret Dibros, the 10 Commandments. He saw the nation celebrating and bowing down to the Egel Azav, the golden calf, and he broke the tablets. When I learned this is David Sherez, when I learned this, I could not avoid the feeling that this all feels very familiar. That these early texts scream to us now. Internal destruction, the breaking of covenants, disgracing all that is holy. They are coming into fruition with the external destruction of our homeland. But the catastrophe starts from within. It begins when we lose grasp of our founding principles, when we focus just on ourselves and wait for someone else to fix what is broken. Our ancestors did not establish this fast day for nothing. They knew very well why we must engrave the memory of the destruction in our flesh. We all see what happens when we forget. We forget how fragile our existence here is. When we forget our responsibility, then our outside, our external control falls apart. Listen, this year I accept upon myself to remember what destruction is, what brings it, and how horrible it is. I will dedicate this 17th of Tammuz to all those who have paid the most precious price, the hostages and their families, the bereaved families, the injured, the evacuated, the soldiers fighting and their partners. They have paid the price for our internal disintegration. And we owe it to them to remember. And from remembering, here's the point, we can repair. To swear that we will never tear this nation apart again. That we won't forgive or accept lack of responsibility. To fight like lions for this state while we still have the option to do so. To take responsibility for all that is rotten and to make sure that the descent to destruction that we have started stops here. Wow. That's why we have these 3 weeks. not to dwell on our failures of the past, but to plan how to fix them for the future. How to heal the rupture between us so that the Vav in Shalom, peace, is whole again. So that the Vav is restored to Eliyahu, who will finally be our harbinger of redemption. But that's what it takes. It takes us healing our internal divisions to make the Vav whole so that we are able to repel any external attack. And that is the only way we will do so. And then Eliyahu will finally become the harbinger of the complete redemption. My friends, I wish you a good evening and a beautiful Shabbos. And I look forward to seeing you soon in person.